Then we will move on to the next person, that is Kirtikumar D. Ramanuj, and he's a research scholar in the Department of English. And his topic is an existential reading on Dangling Man by Saul Bellow. Yes.
Good evening, all. A respected chairperson, Mishra Madam, Abhilash sir, and all the fellow presenters. Let me first tell the dignitaries here that this is my first paper presentation as a research scholar. I am basically working as a lecturer in Dr. Jivraj Mehta Government Polytechnic in Gujarat. I joined PhD before 2 years, and as a research scholar, I am presenting for the first time. So I request the dignitaries and respected academicians to guide me wherever there are faults or there are scope of some improvement, so that can help me in my research. Before making my presentation, as my topic suggests that it's a existential reading of a novel by Saul Bellow, I also felt some existential crisis before making this presentation. Yesterday I started making PPT, and while making PPT, I was not sure what to put in that PPT. My paper is ready, but somehow we have to present this, so I was jotting down the points. But there I felt that there are many choices, what to put and what not to put. This is the starting point of my aim in this research paper or in this presentation, that when we have choice, we have some responsibilities. Whether I put this quote or whether I read this critics, whether I input or whether I what you can say quote this critic or that critic, because once I put it, I have to explain it. So that is my responsibility as a researcher. So when we have choice, we have responsibility, and this responsibility creates some anxiety. Right now, I'm also facing some anxiety because I'm speaking in front of the learned audience, and I am a beginner. I would define myself as a beginner. So this is the starting point of existentialism, defined or originated by Sartre, that every human being has a choice to define his existence and essence, and whatever choices that he makes, whatever responsible choices, authentic choices he makes, his existence will be defined by those choices. Then in the morning, I started planning that what I should do or how should I present. So this planning is also one of the existential aspects. Sartre has defined planning as the essence of man is but a plan. Heidegger, another existentialist, calls this plan as possibilities. Then the day moved on. At 12 in the noon, the electricity went off. And suddenly, I again felt one crisis, that what should happen now? Then I have to drop that plan. I have to drop that possibility. Now there is no possible. I don't have that scope for PPT. So what I do now? Then I started writing some pages, which I will keep in front of me while presentation. At 3, my daughter came, and this is a holiday, so she urged me to play with her. Again, one crisis came that I have to present at 5:30 in front of the learned audience. Once again, I felt something that disturbed my plan. But sticking to the Martin Buber's I thou relation with my daughter, I have to take some authentic decisions, that let me play with her for half an hour. So this is the theoretical framework of of various existential thinkers, from which I will be reading or I will be discussing the novel that I selected, Dangling Man by Saul Bellow. Dangling Man is about a person who has lost his job and who is waiting for his induction in the army. Now, before I begin, I would like to make some analogy. When I search the word analogy, the meaning the dictionary gave me is you compare something in order to clarify some ideas. So when I was reading the novel, I was reminded about various plays and novels of the existential thinker. For example, the first obvious fact is it is in the form of a journal. So Franz Kafka, when he wrote his novels and his work, some of them were in the journal form. The next analogy I can think is of again Kafka's work, The Trial, where a constant a scene is available where three people are constantly being trialed by legal system. Here also there is trial of investigation regarding the identity of the character, and this trial puts identity crisis in his life. The next thing that I remember is waiting. The person is waiting for his induction in the army, which reminds me of Samuel Beckett, Waiting for Godot. There also few characters are waiting for imaginative God or something that we don't know what is Godot is. Here also is waiting for his call, which is getting delayed and delayed because of his identity crisis. He is not an American. He is a Chicago-born person who has migrated to America, and people are creating some bureaucratic delay in his induction into the army. So this waiting is also related to existential framework. Then, as I felt either or condition, what will happen? Should I put this? Should I put that? The way Hamlet experiences the either or condition in his choices. Here also character like Kafkayan mode. Kafka has written Kierkegaard. I'm sorry, Kierkegaard has written one famous work, Either or, where the characters are dangling from this situation to that situation. So the character in the novel can be seen in that perspective as well. Few other things are also there which will make this work very similar to the existential mode of writing. One interesting fact I found in the morning is when I searched or when I googled that give me the names of the novel that constitute the word men, then it gave me a list. Google gave me a list of novel where the word men occur. When I deeply gone through that list, there is Nowhere Man, there is Invisible Man, there is Dangling Man, there are many men available. And when I searched the genre and the types of the writing, I found that in postmodern or what we say the critical what we can say tradition, this adding post to everything now. In this postmodern world, writers have tried to write or focus on men and the problems of men faced in day-to-day life. So when we look at Dangling man, he is one of us. He is Arjun, he is Abhimanyu, he is Sisyphus, or he can be one of us who is dangling between choices, dangling between the various issues that are faced by modern men. And when there are problems, existentialism comes. Okay, ma'am. The novel is about that character who is facing identity crisis, who is facing existential crisis. He is an intellectual. He was writing a project on enlightenment. He was waging a battle like Abhimanyu in Mahabharata, the enlightenment philosophers. But he was not as courageous as Abhimanyu or Sisyphus. He is faced with some existential shock and existential shame, to use Sartre's words. People don't recognize him because he has no identity, he has no reputation. Even his maid smokes in front of him. And his wife or his in-laws, when they offer him juice, they put deliberately chicken inside it. So there are many instances where this character is, what we can say, is reduced to an object, to use an existential term. This creates further neurological and psychological issues. I'm sorry, not neurological, but psychological. And then he alienates himself from the world. I will not go deep into the next various themes that I have discussed. Waiting is associated with nothingness. Like Beckett says, nothing comes, nothing goes. It's awful. So life for him is also awful. Yes, just half minute, if I can take.
Yes, sir, please conclude.
To conclude, I would say he is a man full of tamas gun. To give some Indian interpretation, he is full of tamas. He has to look at the life in the larger perspective. We have problems, we have crises, but we cannot miss the facticity. That is what Heidegger said, that facticity is given, and in given facticity, we have to build our essence. So finally, I would conclude with this line: instead of letting one's life be determined totally by past errors and failures, one should look ahead into future possibilities and construct oneself by constantly making meaningful, authentic choices. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for sharing your observations. And though it was your first presentation, I would say you were very spontaneous. Now, the floor is open for questions from the audience. If anybody would like to ask anything to the presenter, you're welcome to do so.
Yes, you can share your valuable comments or questions to him.
Anyone? Okay, so then I have to say something. While you were, the way you narrated your experiences, brought in your individual perceptions of alienation. Um, how do you look at this activity of trying to uh, identify with the character that you were reading? Is this identification process? Is this attempt to identify with what you are reading? How do you look at it from the postmodernist lens? Is this identification possible? is this connection possible, or is there something which stops or prevents that identification process? Would like to.
I will try. I will attempt to answer this. I beg your pardon, but I'm not very versed with postmodernism or that thing. But with identification, uh, what I can say is, being a human, it is impossible to stop identifying ourselves with numerous things that is happening around. So it is a natural process. I was not aware that I will speak or I will start my presentation in this way, but somehow I was reading this uh, for past 10-15 days, and actual occurrences somehow reflected all those things. So roughly, I don't know how I put it, but uh, sometimes this helps. This is what I can say. And as a researcher, I would say I could reflect it, or I could connect it with the real life. Whatever I am doing, or whatever I have read, I could connect it with the real life situation.
Yes, that's fine, sir. And this is a platform where you can actually come up with your individual thoughts about it. But I have a suggestion for you when you
Okay.
submit the paper, your final paper. Uh, this should have, a style which does not include as many subjective reactions to your readings, because research has to be there is a
Objective.
specific language which has to be observed. So this is just my suggestion when you are about to.
Thank you very much, madam.
Okay. Thank you. Yes, ma'am. To the next presenter.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Kirtikumar, sir. And the next paper presenter is Aditya Raj, and his topic is a postmodernist study of Kim Stanley, Green Mars. Yes, sir.
Thank you very much, ma'am. First of all, good evening to everyone. My name is Aditya Raj, and I am a research scholar in the Department of English at Patna University, Bihar. I am thankful to AIFEST for allowing me this opportunity to share my ideas upon this postmodernist study of Kim Stanley Robinson's science fiction, a second volume of Mars trilogy, which is Green Mars. Now, before delving into this subject, before explaining the topic, I would like to brief a little bit about what exactly science fiction is all about. Science fiction is a term coined by Hugo Gernsback in 1920, and we are thankful to him that it is because of him we have this genre in the history of English literature. Whenever we study about science fiction or we hear about science fiction, we have this perception in our mind that science fiction includes adventures, space explorations. No, it has these ideas of integrating this advancement in science and technologies. But I want, actually, this is now, here starts my very first objective. I
Aditya.
want.
Yes, Mr. Kirtikumar, please mute yourself. There's disturbance from your end. Kirtikumar,
Sorry.
please mute yourself. Yes, go ahead, Aditya.
Thank you, ma'am. So, as I was elaborating this science fiction text, this is the basic theme. Whenever we read about a science fiction, we have this idea of H.G. Wells, Arthur C. Clarke, and most often Kim Stanley Robinson as well. Kim Stanley Robinson is an American science fiction author, and his Mars trilogy is one of the most important and very interesting novel that describes this human journey of terraforming a planet to with different perspective, with different ideas. I will share about that ideas later on. But see, what is important here is whenever we discuss science fiction from this genre, from the science fiction point of view, we often try to find this technological advancement. We often try to find these adventures, we often sometimes relate it with fantasy. Now, this is where I want to draw a very fine line, though this line is already there, but I want to draw a very fine line between science fiction and fantasy. See, a science fiction is very different from fantasy literature because science fiction shows the process of transformation. For instance, if I talk about this process of terraforming in this Mars trilogy by Kim Stanley Robinson, he has very deliberately explained the topic, the process, the physics, the laws. He has not distorted the laws of physics. This is what a science fiction do. He has showed the process, that how exactly. This is why this Mars trilogy contains 3 volumes, which is Red Mars, Green Mars, and Blue Mars. Now, in these 3 volumes, he explained in detail about the process of terraforming and why actually scientists are terraforming the planet, why they want to. Is it the vision of scientists? Are they envisioning to terraform the planet? Or it is the point of view of the transnationals? Because in the novel, they have clearly mentioned, the author has clearly mentioned in the novel, that transnationals want to expand its power, to grow more. Moreover, due to overpopulation and these ecological disasters on Earth, transnationals shifted their views towards Mars. Now, coming to the point why I approached this postmodernist point of view in a science fiction like Mars trilogy is because, see, we all are familiar with these postmodern features, like it breaks through the hierarchies, it questions the universalities idea of truth, region, human nature, all such things. It do not under any circumstances accept supremacy. And this is what we can find in this novel, Green Mars. See, after the revolution of 2061, in the Red Mars, which was failed, it failed like the revolution, the revolution of 1857 India, the very first revolution that we had for the freedom movement, actually, which failed miserably. Similarly, this revolution of 2061, as mentioned in Red Mars, it failed miserably, which cost the life of the scientists, and this post-war period, this Green Mars actually explains this post-war period and how these scientists, these indigenous groups are actually surviving in those hard circumstances, and how they are actually. Here I would like to quote Lyotard's idea of knowledge from his book, The Postmodern Condition, a Report on Knowledge, where he explains that in order to legitimize this scientific knowledge, he adopted the method of paralogy, that is thinking beyond the region, or sometimes thinking against the established norms. Now, this is what these scientists are doing. See, the very opening line of Green Mars. Okay, before going to the opening line, I would like to explain this title Green Mars. See, this title Green Mars is itself very postmodern in nature. Why? Because we have this convention, we have this idea of Mars as a red planet. We see Mars as a red planet, we discuss Mars as a red planet. But this convention of this breaking through the hierarchy, this breaking through the knowledge of understanding Mars as a green Mars. Why? Because here the author wants to pinpoint the fact that from the red Mars, from the inhospitable planet where there was no life, the planet is slowly shifting towards, it is slowly progressing towards showing this sign of life. This green Mars is the sign that now the process of terraforming is actually happening. The process of terraforming is actually being successful there. Moreover, this after this second volume, the third volume, which is Blue Mars, it explains the mirror image of Earth. So in all this process, the question here is that my very objective, why I applied this postmodernist study, is because you see this opening line of Green Mars states that the point is not to make another Earth. They do not, the scientists, this is scientist perspective, they do not want to make another Earth. No another Alaska or Tibet. You see, in place of Alaska or Tibet, the scientists have used no other USA or no other Russia, but they do not incorporated these powerful countries. They instead wrote that we do not want to create any other Alaska or any other Tibet. Why? Because they are less powerful, they are marginalized. And this scientist notion is to establish a society. Actually, this establishment of society is based upon the idea of Arkady, a very famous character from Red Mars who died in the revolution of 2061. His views actually was to establish an anarchy government, an egalitarian government. He was fed up with the government. He was fed up with this approach of transnationals and how they are actually running the society. No, so in this opening line itself express the point is not to make another Earth, another Alaska, another Tibet, but to make something new, something strange, something Martian. These scientists want to make something Martian. It's not another Earth. No, they do not want to make another Earth because they do not want to repeat the mistakes which they already did in the volume Red Mars, which we can see as a revolution of 2061, where many died. No, moreover, when we move up, moreover, applying this postmodernist concept in a science fiction novel, I actually want to break through the genre. This is my very first objective. I want to break through the genre of science fiction in order to understand the society, the character's point of view, and how human culture is actually shaped in a technocentric society. You see, we are actually presenting this paper in this digital format. We thanks to the technology that we are getting this opportunity in this pandemic time, that we are having this seminar, international seminar, in this virtual mode. No, so this movement towards a technocentric society, which Lyotard actually envisioned back in 1979, where he questioned through the process of by interrogating IBM, he questioned that because he gave us a computer for technical and technological advancement. So he questioned what kind of knowledge, the idea, should be stored or is worth storing, and who will have the access to that. And to that, he raised a suspicious finger towards the multinationals, where he stated very clearly that these multinationals will in future run the government. And this Green Mars, which is a 1993 novel which won a Hugo Award at the same time, focuses actually all this volume, this Mars trilogy focuses on this point. So he focuses on this. Yes, ma'am. This is the very first objective, to study human culture in a technocentric society. Second, I want to examine the socio-political aspects of the transnationals. Why transnationals are actually popular? Is it like they want to establish a society to just for the sake of increasing their power, or is it like they want to actually incorporate this idea of Arkady in and helping the scientists to establish an egalitarian society? This is my second objective. My third objective is to understand the postmodernist approach of the scientist in this novel to establish a society, because in Green Mars, they actually decide, they form the government, and in this Green Mars they formed, they actually collect this group of people who were scattered during this revolution of 2061 of Red Mars, and they try to collect, they try to go through the ideas and try to establish, they try to fight against these transnationals, their supremacy that they are putting there. So I want to understand, to go through this postmodernist approach of the scientists in order to establish a society, and to what extent such societies can exist. Will that society be a utopian society? This is what the author wants. Actually, through this Mars trilogy, Robinson's point of view is to portray a utopian society. And most of the time in science fiction, you see, if in science fiction we have this notion of exploring the utopian societies because we are fed up. This is where the term hyper reality actually comes, where this fiction, this ending of fiction and this starting of the reality just mingle down because of this human computer interaction, because of this access of technologies in the world. So with all this extent, this is my study that I have observed, and I would like to incorporate all these points of view there. Thank you very much once again, ma'am. And whatever the idea I have shared, actually, this is my very own point of view. If I am wrong to some extent, kindly correct me, ma'am.
No, first of all, I congratulate you, Aditya. That was a very thought-provoking presentation, and so many strands you have analyzed. And this is what we appreciate in research. You know what you have thought about different aspects, what you have got to say about different aspects. So I think you have made a good start, and when you complete writing your paper, it would be definitely a good one. Now, before I say anything, I would like to ask the other participants if they have any questions. See, questions encourage the presenter. They have told us so many things, so definitely they would want to interact. So I would request other participants to come up with questions, comments, or any observations to Aditya's presentation. You're welcome. Yes, anyone? Okay, so I would like to ask you something, Aditya. What do you see in this term science fiction? As you rightly pointed out, that you wanted to explore the concept of fantasy in relation to science fiction. Uh, how do you look at this term science, along with fiction? How would you look at this branding of the work that you have taken up?
Ma'am, actually, as I already mentioned, there is this very fine line between science fiction and fantasy literature, because fantasy literature do not incorporate this method of transformation. No, but in science fiction we get this method of transformation. How a particular thing is transformed to something, we get to know about that process in detail. For instance,
Yeah,
if
but
I
still,
talk
still
about
there is the word fiction there. That is what I'm interested in. What do you think of this word fiction? Because even fiction,
Ji.
it takes us away from something that we consider real. So, how do you look at this branding? What do you think of this term, science fiction?
Ma'am, to this term, actually, why to understand this, actually, I want to put the point first, that why I choose science fiction for my research studies, because because you see, it was my childhood habit to note down certain things about. I was very much interested in astronomy from childhood time. No, I had these binoculars, and through the help of that binoculars, I tried to see the stars, the moons, and I was very much interested in that term. But due to, and also I am a science student at intermediate level. But due to certain circumstances, I could not get admission in science stream in Delhi University, where I further pursued my this journey in English literature. And here I came to know that actually literature is something which gives a very broad idea, very broad aspect we can talk about anything in literature. We can talk about science, we can talk about any aspect, we can talk about Victorian literature, we can talk about politics, we can talk about economics. And this is what encouraged me. Now, because my obsession was with science very much, so this fiction, this actually this branding of science fiction, I actually see that these scientists, the science, the scientists and the transnationals who are actually incorporating this method of this hegemonizing the society to use the technology, actually they are branding through the help of fiction, they are branding this science to study for the science. I read somewhere in the article, actually I forgot about the name, the critic there mentioned that through the help of science fiction, actually this scientists or this group of multinationals, they want to spread knowledge about science. They want that people should study science, that people should take part in science. So, second thing that is very important is when we say science fiction, we often have this thing that I already said, that we have this notion that adventures and space explorations and all such kind of things therein. So when we say science fiction, we talk about the envision, the imagination of the author. You see, this author, now I would like to talk about the imagination here, actually, because the author do not imagine something something just hastily. They imagine whatever the science fiction we have, they imagine, their imagination, their envision is based upon the ongoing project in science and technology in that part. They do not imagine something just out of somewhere. They imagine based upon the project that is going on in the field of science and technology. So why are they envisioning this? First, they envision this thing in order to portray, in order to give the idea that what our society will be in future, how our we can see through this science fiction. I would like, actually I would like to, I forgot to mention these things in my presentation. You see, these inventions I would like to talk about. For instance, H.G. Wells' War of the World.
Aditya, just cut short, okay? Because we'll first complete the presentations, then again we'll come back if we have time. So just in brief mention whatever you have.
Yes, ma'am. Actually, I just want to mention here, this in talking about the invasion. This science fiction actually evokes the scientist to create something, because you read, see, this War of the World inspired the scientist H.G. Goddard to invent the first fueled rocket for space transportation. Moreover, Arthur C. Clarke's novel Dial F for Frankenstein inspired Tim Berners-Lee to invent World Wide Web. So you see, through the science fiction, we can see the future. Actually, science fiction predicts the future sometimes, which describes, it has the warning as well. For instance, the War of the World, we can see where aliens are coming on Earth and they are destroying our society. No, so it is a warning that excess of technology can create havoc, can create chaos, sabotage can be created. But at the same time, if we read Mars trilogy like Kim Stanley Robinson, we can go through different aspects. Like it is very good to settle human colonies across different planets, but at the same time, you see, there are certain traits, there are certain things that we have to look upon. And the transnational point of view, the realistic point of view should, actually there is this power cut.
No
Ma'am,
problem.
can you see me? uh,
Yes, yes, we
okay.
can see
So
you, hear you also. Yes.
yes, so these are the point of view that actually I want to mention, and what I
Yeah, yeah,
understand with the term
definitely.
science fiction.
What you have asked, Aditya, I can see that you have a very clear idea of what you are going about, and I share with you that fascination for science fiction. We have another question for you if you would like to quickly take it up from Nisha. What is the relation between the idea of utopia and postmodernism? That is what she wants to ask. If in just brief you would like to reflect on it, or if you want to take some time, then we can go for the next presentation and we can come back to this question later.
Actually, I would like to listen her question once again. What she asked, relation
What is
between
the connection
utopia.
between utopia and postmodernism? What connection do you see?
See, actually, when we talk about utopian society, we actually talk about you. What is utopian society? Utopian society means where everything you can access, you have the access. A most favorable society. No, the most favorable society. You will have everything. You cannot question or you cannot complain about anything. No, that is what a utopian society is. But when you ask to relate it with postmodernism, you see, this postmodernism has these features to break through the hierarchies, to break through the conventions. Postmodernism actually breaks through the conventions, it breaks through the hierarchies, it distinctions between the high culture and low culture. So this is complete, in my perspective, this is completely very different, because in utopian society you have the most favorable circumstances, but when you relate it with postmodernism, this relating is very it is a complex term, I would rather say, because postmodernism is something, it relates something very different. It questions everything, it questions the supremacy. But you see, there is no supremacy in a utopian society. There is no distinction between high and low culture in the utopian society. So you cannot actually, from my point of view, if I am right, you cannot actually relate this postmodernism with a utopian society, if I am right.
So that is actually a dialogue, I feel. I mean, is the utopian society absolute Is does it sustain itself? That is a question we need to ask through further exploration of science fiction. So that is a wonderful job that you are doing. I mean, the question is not over. Is there a connection? Is there not a connection? That is a
Yes,
matter of
yes, ma'am.
further exploration. So all
Yes,
the
ma'am.
best, Aditya. That was wonderful. Shri Priya ma'am, to the next presenter.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yes,
Thank you very
thank
much,
you.
ma'am.
Thank you, Aditya Raj, for your great presentation. And the next presenter is Shreya Bharadwaj. She's a PhD research scholar, and the topic is Women Amid Partition, a critique of psychological turmoil in Where Did I Leave My Purdah? Yes, Shreya Bharadwaj. You can unmute yourself.
Actually,
And the audience can feel free to ask questions. Please, you can do that in chat box, or else you can unmute yourself and ask the questions. Yes, ma'am.
good evening, respected panelists and my fellow presenters. My name is Shreya Bhardwaj, and I'm a PhD research scholar at School of Humanities and Social Sciences, Sharda University. So, for my presentation, kindly allow me to share my screen because I have a PPT. Ma'am, I just wanted to ask if you can see my screen. Is it visible to you?
Yes, just turn it into a slideshow
Yes,
so
yes,
that
yes,
yes,
yes, ma'am.
go ahead.
Okay, the topic of my presentation is Women Amid Partition, Critique of Psychological Turmoil and Where Did I Leave My Purdah? Now, let me tell you, this is a joint paper written by me and my supervisor. So, the name of my supervisor is Dr. Mukuta Borah. She's an assistant professor at Department of English, School of Humanities and Social Sciences, Sharda University. However, due to some unfavorable circumstances, she's not present today with me to present this paper. So hence, I have the responsibility to defend this paper on both of our behalf. So let us come to the introduction. Partition of British India into India and Pakistan in 1947 had an extensive impact on the inhabitants of the subcontinent. The collision on women was hitherto unrevealed, accumulatively remembered as a kind of an integrational trauma. Partition still influences people today. Partition primarily designates the political separation of British India into Hindustan and Pakistan, into distinctive independent countries, but the sovereignty of the land of these two factions came up with a price that needs to be paid by the crimson blood, so that the descendants do not live the same life as they did. Now, the discourse highlights the different nature of separation amid partition by putting an emphasis on the conflict of identity. When I say conflict of identity, it is about the segregation of self and other, especially in the women, by recollecting these memories from 1947 partition through Where Did I Leave My Purdah, written by Mahesh Dattani in 2012. Now, Mahesh Dattani in 2012, he has written a book which is a collection of two plays. One is Where Did I Leave My Purdah, the another one is The Big Fat City. In my discourse, I have taken up Where Did I Leave My Purdah to highlight the depiction of women during that time, and obviously dealing with the psychological turmoil. Now, I believe that a partition narrative is primarily structured in two ways. One, that constantly yearns to visit the pristine past. Now, such reminiscences are punctuated with what happened before and after partition. The other and rather troubled sort of recollection harks on the irreparable loss of property and honor of women. Now, let me tell you, a historian or a researcher has to oscillate between both the extremes in order to articulate the position of these victims during that time. Now, this is the front page of the book, Me and My Place, written by Mahesh Dattani. As I've already mentioned, in this book, we have two plays. The first one is Where Did I Leave My Purdah? The another one is The Big Fat City. This was published in 2012 by Penguin Publications. Now, the brief overview about the play. Where Did I Leave My Purdah was first performed on 27th October 2013 in Mumbai Grand Tata Theatre. Now, though it was written by Mahesh Dattani, but it was directed by Lilith Dubey. Now, the play starts with, I must quote, a wrinkled, frail woman in her 80s dressed in a white sari. Now, with this quotation, we were introduced with the chief protagonist of the play, and that is Nazia Begum. Now, the play deals with the psychological journey of Nazia Begum from her teenagehood towards the adulthood, and of course, towards her old age when she has reached to an age of 80s. Now, Purda, why is it being named as Purda? Because she was leaving this Purda behind in order to make her own theater, which she wanted to name as Postmodern Indian Theater. Of course, Purda also symbolizes the trauma, the violence, the hatred, the abduction, the rape that has happened on these women during the time of partition and even during post-partitioned era. Now, it is a powerful psychological analysis of a Muslim woman who was kidnapped, gang raped during the partition of India. This could be analyzed not just by the one character, that is Nazia Sahiba. We have two other characters, Ruby and Nikhat. Now, the difference is these three are from different generations, and this drama, it explores the psychology, the inner state of mind, and reveals the inner life of these partition victims. Now, one thing I must mention in the brief overview, that these literary writers, these postmodern writers, I must say, like Mahesh Dattani, they have used the medium of fiction to explore those areas of political and cultural histories that have been unvoiced, that have been masked, that have been debarred by this typical dominant male society, and of course, they were being removed from the official history that we do have as of today. Now, within this play, Mahesh Dattani also introduced with the concept of playback theater. So, when we look at these kind of theaters, of course, we know that these theaters are now in 60 countries across the globe. The idea is to highlight the trauma. The idea is to highlight the cultural activism. The idea is to bring out the catharsis if the audience is willing to do so. But this theater was set up by Jonathan Fox and Jean Sales. So we have this theater, we have this introduction of this kind of theater, that is playback theater, introduced by Mahesh Dattani himself. Now, let us take a look at the ideas in the narrative, and I must say the prominent ideas in the narrative. So, Nazia Sahiba and her sister Zareen, they faced sexual violence during the communal rites. Now, resulting, Zareen was the one who died on the spot. However, Nazia became pregnant with the other in the society. Now, the impact of this has led to such ramifications that women's psyche was now branded with the negative image, especially of these patriarchal codes. The result of this forcible conversion, the result of abduction, the result of this abusive behavior led to them being considered as new women. And of course, when we talk about new women, this is we know that the movement was started in late 19th century and it moved towards the 20th century, where females were revolting. They were demanding equities in terms of all the aspects of life. So Mahesh Dattani, in order to symbolize the position of women, he intertwined, or I must say, he analyzed Nazia Sahiba's position with the myth of Shakuntala, that is from Abhijanam Shakuntalam, written by Kalidas. So, it symbolizes a life of Nazia, same as that of Shakuntala. Now, new women. Now, when I say new women, it is not just Nazia. We do have Ruby, we do have Nikhat as characters. Now, these new women, they could exert her power and autonomy inside the patriarchal setup. Now, what was that setup? It would help them to be independent from her male counterpart without disrupting the social order. Now, in order to justify this, let me take an example from the play itself, where Nazia was supposed to play a role. And at that time, Sanjay, the director, came to introduce her the role. She was not convinced. She was not ready to play this role. And that very moment, she declined because the position of women was getting depicted in that play, or it was not an appropriate character to be played by a new woman. So that very moment she rejected to play that role. So there comes the idea of new women, because she was demanding equity in life. Now, critical analysis. Of course, writing a research paper, it is very important to analyze them with the theorists, especially these literary theorists. So, in order to analyze, I have taken a few quotations. The first is, "A lot has happened to me, nothing has happened to you." Now, this is a quotation which was spoken up by Nazia herself when she was having a conversation with Sohail. Now, it was that time when she was getting abducted. She was not ready to accept Sohail because she believes that Sohail did not came to rescue her. He did not came to make her believe that yes, male can do a great many changes when it comes to the life of females. Now, to analyze this, I have taken up Gayatri Chakravarti's Fear of Death in a very recent interview in 2008, I must say, given to Francis Wade. Gayatri Chakravarti Spivak believes that the violence or these abduction that has happened on these marginalized people, those who are being considered as subalterns in the society, now it has reached to such a level that they don't even have the fear of death in them anymore. She believes that when equity of life is denied, it produces violence in extremes. Yes, ma'am. Then, of course, the psychological analysis, it can be analyzed keeping trauma theory into consideration. So not just Nazia and Ruby, but we have other Civil War survivors. Now, Ruby wanted Nazia to raise or to answer few questions. These are being listed, but since we are running short of time, I must say that, there is this idea of identity, where Stuart Hall believes that identity is not in the being of the society. It is of becoming and belonging, and this is where these people of divided nations find themselves, especially these people from post-partitioned selves. Now, coming to the conclusion, I believe that this narrative, it deeply sympathizes the universal suffering of people, leading to not just the loss of humanity, but also it leads to the torment of minds. These women, Nazia, Ruby, and Nighat, who could be considered as outsiders or abnormal during that time, they are now being considered as radical feminists. Now, coming to the comparison of Nazi and Shakuntala, it highlights the deeply rooted pain of women during the traumatic phase, and of course, the catastrophic violence that has happened on them. I believe that the Ovega theater women artists were introduced to revolt against the bourgeoisie theaters, and I would end it with a very positive note that it has always been said that a creation will always revolt against its creator. So we can take the example of Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. So same is that these women, they are not just revolting against the male counterparts, but they are also revolting against the partition itself. And of course, partition as a historical event is reconceptualized in the play Where Did I Leave My Purdah by Mahesh Dattani. So with this, I'm concluding my paper. And I can stop sharing as well. So thank you to the respected chairperson and fellow participants for being such patient audience.
Thank you, Shreya. That was indeed an in-depth exploration of the whole idea of partition and how it still lingers in our psyche, and how do we reconstruct whatever happened. And I must say that was a very engaging talk. And I should also say that Mukta Borah ma'am has indeed done a very good job, though she is not here. I hope things are fine with her. And you did a good job in presenting it. So before I do have some things to share, but before that, I would like to ask other participants, those who have listened to Shreya, please come up with some observations or comments or questions, and she would be happy to address them. Anyone? Okay, so Shreya, I would just like to ask you, what do you think of the way memory travels, right? From that time till the present time, it's a journey that the memory has made. How do you think memory of the partition is accessed today? Because today If you go to this is a text that you have taken up, but if you intend to find instances of people who can actually talk about the partition, that generation is slowly disappearing, right? So that connection is um, uh, being lost. It is in the process of being lost. So, as a researcher who is interested in this idea of partition and how it lingers, in our thinking and how it affects our thinking even today, and as we say that postmodernism, whatever we are discussing, it is an exploration of or a thinking about thinking. So, in that sense, I would like to ask you, how do you perceive this? Danger of losing a generation, and what effect it has on the second generation of partition survivors. And have you taken up that issue, or have you thought about that? I would just like to hear.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for the question. Okay, so I would give the answer in three different sections, because first you mentioned about time and memory. So I must say, ma'am, that this play, Mahesh Dattani, if you try to read the introduction of the play itself, Mahesh Dattani himself mentioned these two terms. He said that, I not only try to analyze time through my plays, I also try to analyze memory. So he said that both time and memory go hand in hand when we talk about partition, and obviously when we talk about the survivors itself. Now, coming to the second part of your question, ma'am, since partition literature is itself my research topic, and I have been doing research on partition for almost 1 year, and of course, for that, coming to my research is itself divided into different sections, ma'am. So when you say that the idea of these first generation getting instinct, so for the first generation, what we did, me and my supervisor, so one of the section in my thesis is truly devoted to the interviews being taken up by second generation and third generation. The idea is that how partition has perceived and relived during all these years, and how the whole horror and trauma has been shifted from first generation to second and third. And luckily we were able to find few people from second generation, and for that we have taken interviews, 6 people from India, and at the same time 5 people from Pakistan itself. Luckily we were able to have a conversation with them. So that is the section. And of course, ma'am, we do have partition archive. We can find it very easily on internet. But our idea is that how the second generation are perceiving and reliving partition even after these long years. And for that, and when you say, ma'am, that these people, so our idea is to focus more on autobiographies, to focus more on memoirs. So for that we have analyzed my last paper that I have written. It was all about the memoirs, these autobiographies. So of course, at present, when we are living in 2022, it is very difficult to find the people those who were living at that time. But then they were able to left some marks on us, and that is how they made their autobiographies, they made their memoirs. And at present, when we look at partition literature, if you see, we have several writers, like we have Manto, we have Rajendra Singh Bedi, we have Ishmat Chugtai. But when you look at these memoirs and when you look at these autobiographies, very less work has been done on that. So me and my supervisor idea is to divide the thesis itself in such a way that we could be able to cover some important sections, especially the interviews of second and third generation, then moving to the autobiographies and memoirs written by the people themselves, those who faced it and those who were being traumatized, victimized at the time of partition, uh, especially in 1947 and the 1948 kind of a thing.
So that's really wonderful, Shreya, because you're right. The memoirs, especially of the second or third generation, the way they write those memoirs, it speaks a lot about that gap which they feel. They know the horrors of the partition through whatever they have observed in, let us say, their grandmothers or grandfathers, or their uncles or aunts. They have seen it, or they have heard about it. Now, how they go about negotiating with those identities which are there and aren't there with them, that is something to be explored. So I wish you all the best,
Thank
and that is a very interesting area which you have chosen. So thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Yes,
It's
ma'am.
really an
Shreya.
interesting one. Thank you, Shreya, ma'am, and thank you, ma'am.
Thank you,
Yes,
ma'am.
now let's move on to the next participant. Esny Elias, a postgraduate student, Union Christian College, Aluva, and the topic is Breaking the Fourth Wall of Fiction, a therapeutic narration of Emma Donohue's The Pull of the Stars. Yes. Esny Elias? Yes, thank you.
Ma'am, am I audible and visible to you?
Yes, we can hear you well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Well, my name is Esny Elias. I'm a postgraduate student from Department of English, Union Christian College, Aluva. To say frankly, I'm just a kid in this field of literature, and of course, this is my first paper presentation. So please pardon me for my faults and just encourage me in the following ways. Okay, well, my paper titled Breaking the Fourth Wall of Fiction, a therapeutic narration of Emma Donohue's The Pull of the Stars. I would like to start off by saying that today, in this present scenario, we are living along with pandemic, and a pandemic reign over everything that is close to us and make a mark on us. History says is that there are a lot of, there are few, not at a lot, there are few works that have dealt broadly with the matter of wellness or illness of human body. The term pandemic literature is relatively new, but as of now, there are quite few works that have focused on the theme pandemic and how it affected the society, and it is easily found in the world literature. Well, tracing the history, Boccaccio's Decameron, Daniel Defoe's Journal of the Plague Year, and Edgar Allan Poe's The Mask of Red Death all dealt with the Black Death of 1348 that just plagued the European society during the Middle Ages. While the European literature is focused primarily on the plague, it's the Indian literature that has a Spanish flu that has left indelible markings. Many works, including Emily St. John Mandel's Station 11 and John M. Barrie's The Great Influenza and Ahmad Ali's The Twilight in Delhi, all deals with the 1918 pandemic or the deadly influenza. Well, 100 years later, an Irish-Canadian novelist, Emma Donoghue, penned a novel, The Pull of the Stars, a novel on this very Spanish flu. It is indeed that the novel got published during the year 2020 when another pandemic, COVID-19, broke out. So, the novel Pull of the Stars set in Dublin during the year 1980, a country doubly ravaged by war and disease. The protagonist, Julia Power, works in a hospital that's understaffed. She works in a ward where the expectant mothers were quarantined together, those who have unfamiliar flu and all. And into her stressful days, and two outsiders called Dr. Kathleen Lynn and Brady Sweeney, a young helper, stepped in the intensity and the darkness of the tiny ward. And the narrative is just 3 days, and in these 3 days, their lives changed along with the flu. So this novel depicts the same frustration, tensions, hopes, and dangers that today we face with COVID-19. So my intention is to find or analyze the spread of pandemic beyond the pages of the novel to the rooms that we are quarantined in or to the society that we live in today. So the novel echoes the current pandemic leap out. The signs were posted outside saying that in the novel there were instances about the posters that posted in the walls and streets, the signs showing that cover your cough and sneeze, it's fools and traitors that spread the disease, or there were just instances of the people wearing masks, gloves, and there is an instance when the protagonist is not able to give the penny directly to the taker. Instead, she is putting in a sloshing tin that's offered by the taker for the ticket. And also there were advertisements echoing the stamp of cancelled or postponed, and also long detailed notices avoiding urging the people to just call off all the programs, to just keep away from the cafes, coffee shops, theaters, and all the public places, and to avoid giving shake hands and all these things. And also the newspapers instances showing that the protagonist reading newspapers that showing great news on the increase in report of the influenza and all. all this just echoes the current pandemic leap out that today we have facing, like in the sense we don't have that posters, notices and all, but instead we could, even though in the 1918 it is just in the outside part of the streets and all, or the walls of the streets in the physical world, today we could get every information, every precautions and awareness in the tip of our fingers to the social media and all. And of course the newspapers that tweets in the front page itself that talks about the number of cases, the TPR rate and all those things. All this just echoes the current pandemic leap out. And there's an instance in the novel where two people talking themselves and telling that one is telling that she doesn't wear the mask because she already had she already had gone through the flu, and so that doesn't come again for her. Similarly, there was a notion in our society also where people just believe that only one time with COVID will take them, other next time it won't affect them. But we somehow realized that that's not the case. It can happen again and again. So all these things just echoes the current pandemic leap out. And the framework or the setting of the novel, as I mentioned, is a tiny three-bedded maternity ward where the expectant mothers who are supposed to get give their delivery soon or to give birth soon were having flu, were quarantined together. And it is in this maternity ward they were getting the information about all of those things, all of different dangers or all of different difficulties that happening outside the hospital, in the society and all. And it's a garden where the influenza is beating the inmates hollow, and there were nearly 3 or 4 patients, and it's a 3 days picture of the Dangling, that country, what happened there, and it's all just narrated through these persons. And coming to analyzing, I would like to focus your attention to the crisis that they face individually, culturally, and socially. For considering the individuals, we have the central protagonist, the niece, Julia Power. She already had flu, and her brother, someone just retired from the war, also had flu. Both of them just came back to their feet within 2 weeks. They just had a mild flu. But we somehow saw that how this illness become a shared culture there, because someone informing, an ambulance driver informing Julia Power that they got a call from a person telling that she is not well, and some of them, in 2 or 3 people in their home is also not well. When they just went to take them to the hospital, they found 4 dead bodies, and also a person who just went to the hospital to buy medicine for him and his family just drowned himself to the pond, and a man deranged with the flu just slaughtered his wives and 4 kids. And also a person who just understood that he has flu just jumped out of the window. All this shows that how the mental penetrating, how the society is just mentally penetrating, how the mental trauma is taking them all, and how all these news were just coming to the ward where the other group of people who are also really feared about the trauma and all, they were also struggling, because I already mentioned that the room is the quarantine room or the maternity ward is having pregnant mothers who are supposed to give birth soon. So as we all know that a pregnancy under all normal situations and all normal comfort zone is always dangerous. So along with that, they are doubly ravaged by both pregnancy as well as flu. So they also have a lot of complications and all, and there have been a lot of struggling is going on with their disease, and with the habit of that coughing, sneezing, and all the pneumonic issues that they have. And also, as I said, as understaffed, only Julia Power is enough to take care of them. She's not, as a person, can't handle everyone at the same time. So all of them are suffering, and the spectrum of life and death is also implied in the story. Like, we have 4 patients, and the 4 patients already given birth to children when the novel in the first 2 days itself, and there are 2 of them. Just one lady called Delia Garrett, she just lived, but her child dies, and another one, Mary O'Reilly, both the mother just overcome the flu as well as the child also overcome, just lived. And but in the case of Honor White, she just died, and the son just lived. And what about that Itan Unan? Both of them died. So Julia is getting all the possibilities of death, all possibilities of that spectrum. She's having both birth and death. She's getting all the possibilities. So among all these that happened in 1 or 2 days, the one that struck a lot is the Brady Simmons death. I should say that's the blankness of the death, because while reading, you would never expect that that girl is going to get died, because she already said that she already had flu. She just lied to serve the people. She said that she already had flu, and that made the nurse, the Julia Power, that made him to that made her to just give all the instances, and she just helped her in all the ways, and somehow she also caught flu and she just died. So I would like to move your attention to the transformation of the human society. This illness just brought something better in their lives in the transformation, because as I already mentioned that there is a doctor called Dr. Catherine. She's a run from police, so she's a rebel combatant. But when we are reaching to the end of the novel, we could see that the police is arresting her from the hospital. A lot of people shed their tears, even though they know that she's a rebel combatant, but they understood her selfless service in the hospital, even though she's a rebel combatant, she's fighting for the nation, she's fighting for the well-being of the people itself. And also the shared kiss. I would say that the novel, these in the 3 days, after the 2 days, both Birdie Sweeney and Julia took her off from the hospital, and they just went outside to just feel the air, because for the past 2 days they were working 24/7, and to have the air, just went outside. They feel very happy. They were so peacefully just talked, and they just gave each other a kiss. And this is something unusual, because our society views two women kissing each other as I know that I don't want to explain that. That's already know that society views that as an unusual thing. And even after kissing each other, Julia herself said that this is a synonym of a change, or something a society is going to change, something like it, because she's an unmarried woman. She's 30 years old. During the years, we could get the account from her narrated that she shouldn't felt some kind of love to anyone, but she just had find a bond between Birdie Sweeney, even though they knew only for the 2 days. That's a mind-to-mind connection that we should say. And the journey through illness, the chapters of the novel is just titled, there is only four chapters, even though the pages are 300. So the chapters were titled Red, Brown, Blue, Black, due to the changes that happens to the body while a person travels through flu. That's really quite funny also, not quite funny, quite interesting in the sense, because the chapters title is just based on the colors that the person undergoes, the skin undergoes through the flu. And the greatest transformation that I should say is Julia adopting a child, Barnabas, that she shouldn't know that child before. She shouldn't know his mother Honorate before, just to save that child from the label of bastard. She just adopted the child. Otherwise, the child will be known as a bastard, as well as it will also undergo institutional abuse and all. The novel just end of the novel, it says that Julia had a adventurous pursuit there, because both of them had a good journey throughout the disease, even though she's a ray of hope to all of them. I would like to present her as a medical representative, or those people who provide service during health emergencies. We should really appreciate all the efforts that they had did in the past, and also all the health services that were functioning nowadays for our benefit. And here also the novel, they says that we should all do our bit to come over the pandemic. So I am concluding by saying that to overcome any pandemic, we also do our own bit, like by giving awareness, or just keeping ourselves away from all those things, keeping being in isolation and all. And also after that, you can expect a post-COVID scenario, and we should accept it as it is. Before the COVID or after the COVID, we should accept the society as it, we should accept the people as it. With this, I'm concluding my words. Once again, thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Esny, for that very passionate deliberation, and I would say that you really feel for what you are what you intend to say, and that is a very good thing in a presenter.
Thank you, ma'am.
And I congratulate you. You have very meticulously analyzed the text. And I do have some observations, but first I would like to ask the other participants. Aditya is somebody who is interested in science fiction. So, if anybody, if you have any questions for Esny, she would love to answer. I can see the excitement on her face. So I think we should ask her some good questions. Yes. Okay, so let me ask you something, Esny. It was really interesting, the way we grapple with COVID. We continue grappling with it, and COVID has brought in so many changes. Some we manage to understand, some we don't. We are still in the process of, trying to comprehend what has happened to us and to the society. So it's very important to look at this whole concept of illness. What is considered illness? What is disease? And what are our perceptions of disease? Because as you have rightly touched upon many a time, it is what we perceive. The disease lies in our perception, and that is something which is interesting. The angle of queerness which you brought in, I would say that is some years before, even that was considered a disease, right? That element. Thankfully, we are rid of that mentality now. We are in the path of being rid of that mentality. But I would like to ask you, Esny, how do you look at this whole concept of disease, rupture, uh, this masking? Because I believe that masking, both the physical masks that we wear and hiding, that is a very significant part of how we try to conceptualize disease, understand disease, the things that are told to us, the things that are hidden to us. How do you visualize these things, and what do you think this masking or this hiding, this putting away from perception, how does this bear upon the way we think of illness and disease today?
Thank you, ma'am. I found this as an interesting question. I would like to point out, like Susan Sontag, once in her book Illness and Metaphors, just said that illness is just a night side of life. If my memory is like, there's a quote like that. It's a most onerous relationship. Like we all believe that illness is just kind of a punishment. Like by looking at the history or the Puranas or all these things, there has been God giving punishment, and it is this illness. Everyone has a belief like that. But my perspective is that, or what I understood on my reading is all, illness is just another phase of life. We should be very happy in the sense that while we were walking through the illness, but most probably it is not possible because everyone is giving the notion that illness is something very, very horror in the sense, because we have, when we read the biographies of people, those who outlived cancer or such kind of diseases, we have so many such kind of books in Malayalam, and all of them just say that it's like having, they were happy, they were actually all right. It's the people who make them very worried, make them tensed and all. So basically, I'm also a person who just passed through COVID, and I should say it's COVID made my paper better, because it's while I am in quarantine and all, I just framed my argument and all. What I understood is that it is society's outlook on a disease make it good and bad. So I just thought like this: if someone reads my thesis and just understand that this is just part of life, and if that makes a change in them, I feel very happy with that. That's what made me to research on this area, and I should take a minute to thank my guide, because when I suggested this topic during my degree classes and all, like I would like to do something on this, he's the one who helped me, he's the one who encouraged me to go for this, go for pandemic literature. It's just an interesting topic, and I just really just fell loving with that. And when that ma'am, you asked about the masking and all, it's the masking. I would like to say that it's not only happening in the case of disease, it happened with everything, because everyone in the sense has two faces, one they just showcase and one they have within themselves. And with the masking, like we know that in the case of disease, it's not just masking makes us isolated, or today we will just wear mask and all. It's our commitment to not to pass that disease to other person. I still remember the day that when I first had mask on my face, that's like, what's the purpose of all these things? That's not needed in the sense. But somehow I understood that I had COVID, but I was okay with that. I didn't have much health issues and all. But someone who has a lot of health issues, if they get affected by COVID, that will make a danger to them. It is that realization made many of them to use the mask and all. And this masking is not to just hide the virus. It already is to hide the virus, or it's just not to pass that virus to someone else, but also it's way of just keeping ourselves healthy, ourselves free from others. Like my father and others in our area used to say that while wearing masks, there's I don't know whether they were just learned or telling that they used to say that while using mask, a lot of respiratory and allergic diseases were reduced. So by the time when we will look forward to many years and all, we should say that the days that we had mask were healthy days of our life. So that's what I had or thoughts on this masking. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for that question.
Thank you, Esny, and I'm glad that you did not mask your experiences and you were very, open with them, because you see, this is the thing. We should just be honest with whatever we have felt, because we are adding to the body of literature that is there just by discussing these things, just by coming up. You say there are so many, pandemic narratives. What are they? I mean, whatever discussion we are having in this conference, aren't they a kind of narrative, and aren't we adding to that body of literature which is available? So I would like to congratulate you that you have taken up this particular topic, and I wish you good health, and we are really happy to see that you are all smiling and back in form. So all the best, and thank you. So
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Shri Priya
That's
ma'am.
really great, Esny, and thank you so much. And the next person is Dhruti Moni Mahanta, got MA. She's doing MA, Cotton University, and the topic is tracing the criterion of postmodern tenacity in the shadow lines by Amitav Ghosh. Ma'am,
Is she there in the room, ma'am?
I think she is here. The video is paused, I guess.
Maybe she has some technical issues or something.
Yes, ma'am.
Last paper is actually my paper. Dhitimoni Mohanta's paper was the first paper. Mine is the last one.
Yeah, she had not joined, I think.
Ma'am, is that you?
No. Mine is the last paper. Myself, Mridusmita Mohanta, Dr. Mridusmita Mohanta. That is my last paper. Dhitimoni Mohanta's paper was the first paper. That was a joint paper. Yeah, joint paper, I think that was.
Okay.
Okay, so is she there?
I don't know. I have no idea.
Okay, Shri Priya ma'am, can you see her?
I don't think she is here, ma'am. I thought she's the one.
Then let us go ahead with the next presentation. Ma'am is here, so let
Yes.
us listen to her. Then if
Sure. Yes,
we can go ahead. Yes.
Yeah, thanks
Please,
a lot. Yes. I think I can present. I have a few slides with me.
Yes, ma'am. Please do share.
Is it visible?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Please, could you put it on slideshow? Then it would be.
I will.
Thank you.
I will.
All the best.
Just a second. I'll just make it ready.
Yes.
So actually, I am using one. My topic. My topic will be something that is very remote thing. What all the others were using. Isn't this is all that my just past the paper that we have just heard. It's a very recent topic that she has been
Yes.
working
That
on.
was
Yes.
interesting.
So my thing is based on it is something on a very remote past, but I want to see the whole thing from a perspective of, from a study of postmodernism. Postmodernism, in a sense that that how this whole idea of new ways of thinking in the postmodern era, how it has how it has been touched by the mind of the people, how it has been touched by the people in a way, because I have based my presentation on a myth, that is the myth. I hope I am audible. Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am, we can hear you. Yes.
Yes, yes, yes. Yes, the title of my paper is A Postmodern Approach to the Communicative Aspect of Mythology, a study into the myths of Brahmaputra. So first, just let me tell you one thing, that the myth that I have taken, that is taken from the Kalika Purana. Kalika Purana, from the 10th chapter of Kalika Purana, where the birth of river Brahmaputra is narrated. It is a myth. A myth, as we know, that the study of myth, though the whole thing is concentrated on the postmodern aspect, just for a few minutes, I want to go for the technical aspect of the myth. As we know that it is of Greek origin. The word, it has come from the word mythos. It tells us about anything that can be a speech, that can be a thought, that can be anything which is narrated by the word of mouth. So it has come from there, and basically it is the idea that has been developed, that has been structured, and that has been studied under the discipline folklore. So one of the famous folklorists, he is Bescom, in his book The Forms of Folklore, he has given a definition. I have just taken up one definition just in order to enter into the world of myth. So myths are defined as tales believed as true, usually sacred, set in the distant past or other world, with extra human, inhuman or heroic character. So that is the component of mythology, that is the component of myth. I'm not going to characteristics of myth and any other things. I have come up to the communicative aspect of myth, and I am trying to see how a story of the past, we do not know who has written it down. It is not possible to find out the writer, the creator of the myth, but in the transition of the generations, they are accepted as true oral stories. It is a narrative. The narrative, it was oral. Basically, it was oral, but it has entered into the written communication from. It has come into the written form, and how we can enter into the world of myth in order to know ourselves. That basically that is the focus of my paper. So the communicative aspect of myth, that is a function of the myth, in order to show that, I have started with this Edith Caspo's functions of myth. He considered on the social ideology. He has connected the whole narrative of myth in connection with the society. So in myth, the narrative, symbol, and rituals, these are the three avenues, the basic three avenues through which a myth is understood or myth is realized. And as a combination of these three aspects, so how humanity is connected with the universe, how humanity is connected with the society. So these three things, how it establishes a relationship between these things, it has tried to show this. So when a myth is approached from a postmodern aspect, from postmodernism, the focus I have given in my paper, considering myth as a discourse, it is a communication. It is not only a text, it is a discourse. The postmodern idea of relativism, the concern of relativism, and how that whole idea of relativism, it is connected with the context. So here I just want to put one more thing, that when in my abstract I have also written that it has got two aspects I have seen. The one, how it is connected with identity, how we identify ourselves. But from identity, the word identity, what I have used here, I have concentrated on the identity of the community, how the myth on the Brahmaputra helps people to connect themselves. There are enough examples, there are enough literary examples where the people living on the bank of Brahmaputra flows through Assam, on the bank of Brahmaputra, how they love to identify themselves as a inhabitant on the bank of Brahmaputra. Brahmaputra is also called, in Assamese, it is also called Luit. So people of Assam loves to call themselves as Luit Poria. That means who lives on the bank of the Luit. So this very aspect is connected to that story, that the myth in the Kalika Purana. So considering the universal values of that myth, that how it has helped the people of on the bank of Brahmaputra from a study where they can identify themselves. So just for very quickly, though I have in my paper, though I have not prepared the whole paper, but my focus is given on the structural approach to myth from Levi-Strauss analysis of myth from his book, The Structural Study of Myth from 1955. So there he has given that importance. The myth are structured like language. So as language, when it comes into with all its embellishment and other things, when it comes into the question of communicative aspect, so it gives us a meaning. So in the same way, the structure of language, myth also has got a structure as Levi-Strauss has concentrated upon. So when he talked about this, when we concentrate on that, the very idea of the diachronic concept of the myth, if we minus the diachrony, if we minus the whole idea of timelessness, then it tells us about the past, present, and future with a specific structure. Very quickly, I will go to the structure. So that taking the timeless aspect, considering the timeless aspect, the linguistic, that ground from which that ground, it keeps on rolling. Because if we minus the time when the myth was constructed, then we can just roll it to our own present ideas. So that is the postmodern turns, as I feel, to revisiting the ideas of the past in order to know ourselves. So very quickly, I will tell you what there are two myths regarding the birth of Brahmaputra in the Kalika Purana. So this means that there was a famous ancient sage. His name was Shantanu, and he lives in the Kailash Manasarovar area with his beautiful wife Amukha. So for one day, the sage was away. He went to collect some fruits and flowers and other things, and in the meantime, Lord Brahma appears there. So Amogha was a very beautiful lady, and he falls in love with Amogha, and he wanted to make love with her. But Amogha denied it. He said, "I have a husband. I'm not going to accept your proposal." Brahma departed, but his semen's discharge in that place, it was left there. And when Shantanu came back, he noticed it. He understood that this is Brahma's semen. Then he felt guilty, and he has inseminated it into the womb of Amogha, and subsequently a watery body was born. This is what is there in the Kalika Purana. So he has kept the watery body, considering it to be his son, and he has placed that watery body in the midst of 4 mountains, and after that the watery body started growing, and it becomes a very huge pond type things. And in that way, so this is the myth that what he has said, that when we see, I will just show you, because I could not tell you the whole myth here. I will just show you how it is, how that myth, if we divide it with the help of binary opposition, and from the structural point of view, if we divide that myth into these 2 parts, in one part, Shantanu's departure from the hermitage and the arrival of Brahma, Brahma's request to Amogha for making love, and her denial, they are opposite to this whole structure, is opposite to each other. Brahma's departure, leaving his semen, then Shantanu's arrival, and he accepts the semen, and he persuades Amogha for accepting it, and the watery body is born. So the birth of Brahmaputra, then it is connected with another myth, that is the myth of Parasurama, a very famous myth. Everybody knows that after killing his mother, he wanted to free himself by cutting that pond. And when he cut it with his axe, then the water body comes and it has passed through this land, passed through Assam, and finally a civilization is created. So with that civilization, the people on the bank of the civilization, if we consider it by revisiting the past, by revisiting or by concentrating on the myth that has been come down to us through different transitional generations, that we can connect ourselves with our identity, the identity of the people in the civilization. It has been connected with that myth. And how can we understand it? Only if we give it a very postmodernistic aspect in the study of the myth. And the whole thing is a very big thing now, as I feel it's a very big thing as in connection with the study of myth. So in a very nutshell, this is what I have presented. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. That was a really interesting presentation, and I enjoyed listening to these myths about the birth of Brahmaputra. And in fact, it was a kind of journey. It was as if I was there with you, and as if I was sharing that myth with you. So this was a very nice experience for me, and I was reminded of these two lines of poetry as you were just going about with your presentation. We dance round in a ring, and suppose the secret sits in the middle and knows. So I was just reminded of these two lines. So what you were talking about, ritual and what import it has for the society, what levels of communication a ritual engages in. I would say that you have made a very good and systematic study, and I enjoyed it thoroughly. I would just like to ask you something. I love the idea of timelessness and how it almost seems like a device, and intentional device to own the myths of the past, so that we do not lose that connection with those myths, and we relive those myths, we reconstruct those myths. So how do you look at this process of reconstructing myths, and do they retain their status of a myth when they are reconstructed? Because you see, if myths travel across time, there will be changes, there are bound to be changes to the myths. So what happens, I'm really interested to know about your observations. This journey that a myth makes from let us say a time long before to the present time, what happens to that myth, and how do we perceive that change today?
Yeah, basically what I was focusing on, how we reconstruct the identity with the help of the myth. Basically, and very luckily, though it is orally, it is transmitted and transmitted, we have the written authentication. Kalika Purana is very much available in the written form. So there is the point that where you are focusing, reconstructing the myth. I don't think that the whole basic structure of the myth can be reconstructed, isn't it? That structure cannot be reconstructed. Newer, and the one thing that I have said, if we remove the diachronic aspect of the myth, that is what I did not mention here. Purposefully I have not mentioned here, because if we see how a river comes to life, because we know that from a glacial womb the river comes up. The second myth that is there in the same chapter and connected with the 81 chapter of the Kalika Purana, and all of us know about this myth, people are very much unknown, but about the myth of Parasurama, people know about it very well, isn't it? So when he wants to free himself from the sin of the mother's matricide, then he cuts that glacial womb, that water body which was placed by Shantanu there. Then the river comes up. So I feel that removing the diachronic aspect, we have the scientific, because we know the people in those ancient times, they are really much more scientific, even if their scientific discoveries and inventions were not there. So if we see from a very scientific ideology, those myths are really, it tells about a very scientific process. That is why I was very happy to listen to these papers which talk about science fiction and other things. And I felt if these type of myths are also seen when you talked about the reconstructing the myth, might be in a science fiction, it may come up. This is very, very much my personal view.
Yes, ma'am, because I was really struck by that idea that what happens, to these kinds of narratives when they travel across time. So that is a sort of time travel, as you rightly say.
Time travel,
So
yes, ma'am. Another thing that I want to say, when we tell stories to our, when we listen to stories, when we tell stories to our children, then I feel one thing that normally in school levels, when stories are asked to write, there is a moral that is to be written at the end of the story. And I feel the moral is nothing but removing the diachronic aspect of the story and just putting it into ourselves. This is what I
true, and
personally
it
feel.
is also interesting that the word science is associated with morals as well. We say moral science. That is the thing
Yes,
that is
moral
quite
science. Yes, yes, yes. So it is not only abstract things.
yes,
It is
true.
not only abstract things.
Thank you, ma'am. That was wonderful, and the discussion was so interesting as well. So, okay, thank you, ma'am. Shri Priya, ma'am, is our first
Yes,
presenter
ma'am.
present here
She's
in.
not here, ma'am. Even Sangeeta M also not here, I guess. She's not here. So
No,
I
ma'am,
think
they are not here. Our first presenters are
yes,
not here, ma'am.
yes. First and last presenters are not here.
Yeah.
Okay. So then we are done, I think, with the
Yes, ma'am. We
presentation.
can wind up. Yeah, we can wind up.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank
Okay.
you everyone for giving me the opportunity to listen to these very young scholars. That is the basic thing of this conference. Degree students.
Thank you, ma'am. And I really thank all our presenters. This is a very energetic session, and we enjoyed putting our ideas together. And I also thank Shri Priya ma'am for keeping the time and coordinating the whole session. So thank you all, and we can wind up.